Good evening, group. Thank you, Sarah. If all of you will please mute your microphones, we'll get on with the business of the evening. Welcome back to EDL 740 Zoom session, graduate research, and boy, the finish line is in sight, is it not? This is week 6, and as just a reminder to all of you, somebody has their microphone on. Who is that? Please, I can't tell who that is. Thank you. This is week 6, and as I've told you repeatedly, this will be the last Zoom session for EDL 740 for this term. You will not have a Zoom session next week, but you will have a final exam, but it should come as no surprises to you because you've already got it in your hands. Another reminder that in week 7, the deadline for all of your learning task submissions is Saturday evening instead of Sunday evening next week in week 7. As I was reading through your stuff this week, I was reminded, I began my career pretending to be a math teacher and an athletic coach. And my first assignment in math teaching was with 7th graders, and I can remember every year telling the 7th graders in August, that's when we started school in Texas, that if they learned nothing else from me, I was going to make sure that those 7th graders understood in May that the relationship between fractions and decimals and percents. I said, you're going to learn that, if not another thing. So I'm going to tell you all, if you don't learn anything else from me this term, I hope you'll take out no. I intend for you to learn how to get reasonably close on your APA citations. And also, it's important to me, I think you know by now, that you address the prompts. I do not ask yes/no questions, and I do not give multiple choice exams, and that's on purpose. I don't think those generate much critical thought, but I want you to address the prompts. On the APA citations and the least beneficial prompt, those are the ones that seem to be causing the most heartburn. I can almost hear some of you cursing at me when you open your grades and see that I've deducted a point for that. Something I came to the conclusion early in my career, even though I was a math teacher, and I still believe this completely today, and I've said it many times as a principal to faculties, I'm not sure that we ask students to do anything that's more intellectually challenging than to write. Because when you're writing something, the challenge is to get whatever's in here out and expressed in textual form in a way, such a way that others can understand clearly and completely what it is that came from in here. And that's just pretty tough. And those of you that are English teachers are probably cheering at that comment. But I want you to please address the prompts. And when it comes to that writing thing, let's go to the least beneficial one, because that's the one that a bunch of you have been dodging, and I've been telling you, you've been dodging it. At the very highest end of the Bloom's taxonomy, and I don't care if you studied the 1956 version of Bloom's taxonomy, in which Dr. Bloom was the one driving it, or if you studied the 2004 or 2006 version of Bloom's taxonomy, which was Dr. Bloom's proteges that refashioned them. But on both versions of it, at the very high end is that evaluation component. That's one of the highest levels of cognitive effort and challenge that we can put in front of students. So that least beneficial prompt that I'm asking you to do, I know that some of the videos and some of the content is all good, but I don't want you to say it's all good. And I don't want you to say there's nothing there that's bad. I didn't ask you if there was anything that was bad. I want you to tell me what in that content, what you find, or what you think is probably going to be the least beneficial piece of it to you. I'm trying to do what Dr. Dan Willingham from the University of Virginia says, is to get you to think about the content just a little longer. Let's jump into, by the way, this is week 6, as you know, and here in week 6, you're getting exposure a little bit on a little more technical stuff, questionnaires and surveys, things of that nature. And then in week 7, we'll shift our focus, and it'll be a little more education-centric, because it'll be focused particularly on theories of learning. And my intention is, by ending our term with that, it'll sort of pull all the pieces of the research together and give it some coherence for you as you think of it in the context of the work that you and I do on a daily basis. On the prompt that I pitched at you in week 5 on the learner leveraging, several of you commented on how your classmates pick up or focused on something that you missed, and that by design, that's the reason I pitched that prompt at you. I hope that you see that the very same thing happens in your classroom. You may be reading from the same textbook, or you may have students reading the same novel, or you may be teaching the quadratic formula, but that room full of students, whether there's 8 of them or 20 of them, or in some cases, some of you even have 35 or 40 students in your class at one time. Somebody please turn your mic off. Thank you. But however many students you have, even though you may be delivering the content in a very homogeneous and very tight way, those students are picking up different pieces, different signals, different components, different nuances of that content. So just like what's happening in your class, this class, I mean, some of you are reading or listening to or watching or consuming the exact same content, but you're taking very different things out of it. I want you to think in terms of being in a leadership role on a school campus, because the same thing will happen with a faculty. If you show them a TED Talk, or if you give them an article to read in Jigsaw, or if you give them an assignment to do in professional development setting, that faculty is going to take a whole bunch of different things out of that content from their own perspective and viewing it through their own lenses. If you're going to be a principal, the same thing's going to happen with your leadership team. The largest team I had, campus I served, had 9 assistant principals, and there were 9 counselors on the campus. And so when we, and then of course department chairs. So when we were having a leadership team meeting, there was about 20, 25 people in the room. And whatever it is we were discussing or consuming or considering, there were a lot of different perspectives being brought to the table in those conversations. I say all that to say this. As you think about yourself in the leadership role, don't ever lose sight of the fact that everybody on your team is viewing problems and challenges and assignments from a little different perspective. It's one of the reasons it's so important for you and I to communicate clearly and succinctly. But also, don't ever lose sight of the fact, particularly when you're doing some professional development stuff, the value of gaining those perspectives and that insight from that vast array of smart people. By and large, all those faculties and all those leadership teams are full of really smart, and all of them are educated people. But at the end of the day, if you put a bunch of math teachers together, like I was, math teachers tend to see problems and challenges through the lens of math teachers. English teachers tend to see problems and challenges through the lens of English teachers. Fine arts teachers, you name them. So if you can mix groups and get a diversity of thinking among those discussion and dialogue cells, you can quite often come up with some pretty rich conversation and also some very creative and innovative kinds of solution crafting to the problems that you're dealing with. On the proposal ad nauseum discussion prompt that I gave you, Clearly, your research questions are getting tighter, and by design, I intended for that to happen, and I knew it would happen as you get a better hold on that content and a better understanding of the research process in general. And I think most of you, from the comments I've seen, you're beginning to get a deeper understanding of just how hard it is to design a quality study that will inform the profession. It's pretty tricky to pull that off, but your questions are getting tighter, and I'm enjoying it, and I'm looking forward in week 7 to seeing the final version of those questions as you do put those on your final exam for me. On the lit review this week, no, I'm sorry, lit reviews were in week 5, but quite a few of you seem to like the comments in the video with Dr. Patton on that topic, and it's really, lit reviews are about us pulling in the collective thinking of a lot of smart and thoughtful and well-educated forebearers, other people that have thought about these issues that we're interested in, spent the time to research it themselves, spent the time and accepted the challenge of trying to write in a way that was clear enough for you and I to make sense of what it is they thought they found and what they concluded from their work. It's really also, as Dr. Patton pointed out, not only is the lit review an opportunity for you and I to take a look at the work, at the historical work. I love the phrase that he used, you know, the intellectual heritage, the genealogy. But it also provides an opportunity for you and I to make the case with our audience that we know what the hell we're thinking, we know what the hell we're talking about, and that we think we're onto a trail that will help improve our profession and student outcomes at the end of the day. So when you're taking a look at those lit reviews, and Dr. Patton mentioned digging into the classics, I can't tell whose mic's on. Someone has their microphone on. If you would mute that, please. Mary's. Thank you. So on that topic, the lit reviews really is like it's a journey of bringing coherence to the topic that you and you're interested in studying. And
hello.
Thank you. If you're interested in child development, then yes, you need to stick your nose in the works of Piaget. If you're interested in experiential learning, yes, you need to read the seminal works of John Dewey. If you're interested in lesson design, yes, you need to read the work of Wiggins and McTighe. If you're interested in servant leadership, you need to read the works of Robert Greenleaf. And the same can be said down any of these niches, these research niches. The lit reviews also is a fair game of daisy chaining, if you will, that scholarly work. You're really making a case. Maria, can you hear me?
Yes.
Would you mute your microphone right down at the bottom? Thank you. So you can, what the lit review amounts to is daisy chaining that scholarly work through the years that adds credibility to you and me. And I'm a blogger. Some of you follow my blog, and thank you for those of you that do. I appreciate that. I'm always flattered when people spend their precious time to read what I write. But I believe that my audience affords me a higher level of credence, because they know I'm well read. And if you read my blog, usually I post a very short review when I complete books that I'm reading. And Dr. Patton also referenced that intellectual heritage things. That's got a nice ring to it, I think. Anyway, on the microscopic in week 6, the microscopic discussion prompt that I threw at you, I pitched that prompt at you for a couple of reasons. One, I want to keep bringing your brains back to those ELCC standards. I've said it to you repeatedly, but I'm going to say it to you again. Whatever credentialing exams you're going to set for are going to be highly aligned to the standards, and it doesn't matter if you're CNI or a leadership program. And also, beyond that, because it's not just about the damn test, beyond that, it's about those ELC standards were put together by groups of very capable, thoughtful educators. And they built a very nice framework that allows you and I to look through those various lenses, and it kind of chunks out the work of school leadership through those lenses, through the vision, through the student achievement, through the fairness and integrity and the organizational management. It's a very nice way to chunk the stuff out and think about the work in those compartments, even though those of you that are doing it, like Brandy and others, know that it's almost impossible to take that work apart and engage in it on a day-to-day basis in little slivers like that. It's all integrated stuff. But I'm going to keep bringing you back to those standards, and the final exam will do the same thing. The second reason I pitched that microscopic prompt at you too is I wanted you to think about the school leaders that you have worked with or served in your career. Because some of them do a much nicer job of staying focused on the important stuff than others do. And I hope that you'll slow down and carefully read the contributions of your classmates as they're commenting about those effective school leaders that they've worked with over the years. I think you can learn some valuable lessons that you can take to heart and apply in your own practice once you assume those roles. The lit reviews and the research process both. They afford us the opportunity to access a world of unfettered information, more than any other previous generation has had at their disposal. That's good and it's bad. In previous years, when I first was in the process like you are in the mid-90s, when I was just beginning the graduate work, I still had to go into the library. I still had to go up into those shelves of those books. I still had to go into the periodical section and dig around looking for information that I thought I needed. Now all of that is at the touch of our fingers. And it doesn't matter whether we're sitting in our SUV at a softball game or whether we're actually in our office. We have it anywhere, anytime. Previously, there were some very well-entrenched gatekeepers to that information. The only people that got books printed went through publishers. And those publishers had very specific and pretty high hurdles that folks had to clear in order to get published. The same thing in periodicals. And now you and I, even people like me, can just reach out there and start blogging and have numerous people read what we write every day, and nobody filters it. Nobody filters it. The bad side of having all that unfettered information is this. You and I now have to be much more astute, much more disciplined, and much more discerning filters of information ourselves. And that's one of the reasons that we drag you through this course. And it's one of the reasons that I try to focus on it so heavily in the perspective of helping you to learn to be a very critical and skeptical reader, but not cynical. I don't want you to slip into cynicism, because there's not much to be learned from living in that environment. Somebody, and I can't remember who brought this up, the phrase they talked about the need for you and I to be practitioner scholars, and I love the way that was phrased, and it's absolutely apropos. It's sort of like one of my favorite bloggers is a marketing guy named Seth Godin, Godin. I think I've probably mentioned him to you before. He's actually written some very interesting books too. Most of them ebooks. But Seth uses a similar sort of dichotomous argument when he asks in one of his blogs, would you rather deal with an artisan or would you rather deal with a vendor? And if you think about that a minute, would you rather deal with an artisan or would you rather deal with a vendor? Now, I think if you do think about that, you probably you give the answer that most attorneys that I've dealt with over the years, the same answer they give to almost every question I've ever asked them. They always answer it the same way. And I guess I should take the law exam because I know the answer to all the questions now. The answer is it depends. In some instances, you want an artisan because you're looking for creativity and innovation and inspiration and passion. But in some cases, you want a vendor, someone that's got a solid product for a fair price that'll do a job that you can depend on and you can reach out to, and that they'll guarantee their work. Same thing with practitioner scholars, if you'll think about it. And I want you to think about this in the perspective of leadership. Effective practitioners are like the vendors. They're the people that have the ability to produce the product in an effective and an efficient way, in a dependable way, with the outcomes that you kind of expect. It's the difference in staying in a bed and breakfast or a Fairfield Inn. Both of them have some pluses and minuses, but when you stay in the Fairfield Inn, you know exactly what you're going to get, and it doesn't matter if you stay in one in Mississippi or one in Arizona or one in Washington State. It's going to feel and look very much like a Fairfield Inn. If you decide to go the bed and breakfast route, you're not sure what you're going to get. It'll be unique, you know that. But on the scholar practitioner piece, I'll tell you what. Let me give you an analogy that I think might help you in this regard, because I want you to think about this in terms of your leadership. For 40 years, I played golf. I started when I was in probably 7 or 8 years old and loved the game. I just absolutely loved the game. Couldn't play enough of it. And about 40 years later, it was in my late 40s or about the time I got to be 50 years old, somewhere in that ballpark. I came in one evening and I told my lovely wife that I was going to quit playing golf. And she looked at me, Mo, my lovely bride of 42 years now, and she looked at me and she went, bullshit, you're not going to quit playing golf. And I said, yep, I'm going to quit playing golf. And she said, no, you're not going to quit playing golf. And I said, Mo, I stopped at Goodwill on the way home and left my golf clubs with them. I don't have golf clubs anymore. I'm done. And she wanted to know why. And I said, well, I played 40 years. I couldn't get any better. And I really couldn't see any prospect of getting better. So I decided maybe I ought to be spending my time doing something else. But here's my point. Over the years, and I want you to think about this in the term of people that work in your building that are teachers and assistant principals and principals, leadership people as well. Over those years, I would play from time to time with other golfers that they'd be in cutoff shorts, flip-flops, a dip of snuff in just between their cheek and gum, baseball cap on backward. They'd have clubs that didn't match, like they bought them in garage sales, not one garage sale, but several different garage sales. And they'd grab one of those clubs with little or no thought, and they'd stand over the golf ball, and they would swing and hit that thing just as sweet as you can imagine. The ball would fly true to the target they were aiming at, and then they'd put the club back in there and then head on down the fairway and do it again and again and again. They had the skill. It was natural and it was innate. But if you ask them, how did you decide which club to use? They go, hell, I don't know. Yeah, just go to club. if you ask them what considerations they put into how they aimed the club, or where they were aiming on the green, or they could not tell you, they could not give you the technical language of that skill. On the other hand, I played, and more often, I played with people like this. They had the really expensive slacks and the $300 shoes. They had the nice golf shirt with the collar. And by the way, if you don't play golf, the country club will not let you play on their golf course unless you have a collared shirt. You can't wear one like I've got. You have to have a collar. Most of the time, they won't let you wear blue jeans. And these people like this, they also, not only did they have the expensive clothes, they had the expensive clubs, thousands of dollars. They had all kinds of little devices that they would look through. It would tell them exactly how many yards it was to the pin. They could tell you which direction the wind was blowing and how fast. They could tell you by looking at the green which way the ball was going to break, whether it was going toward the water or away from the water. And they could talk through it perfectly. They could grab the appropriate club. They could stand over the ball and they could swing at it, and it was like someone was trying to dig a ditch for a sewer line. Could not hit the ball well or cleanly for their life. They had the technical language. They had the intellectual knowledge. What they did not have was the skill to make it work. So my challenge to you is to think about your role in leadership. We're working with teachers and faculty and support people. What ideally we want is people that have the skill and people that can converse about that skill in the appropriate technical language with the knowledge base. That's the job that you and I have. And actually, I'm trying to work on that with you right now, is to help you develop the intersection of the skill and the knowledge so that you become a practitioner scholar. Not just a practitioner, not just a scholar, but an effective leader. I'm going to jump into book recommendations right now. And the first one I'm going to mention, this is a nice segue because I'm going to mention to you a book that really had a lot of influence on the way I think. And the title of the book was The Answer to How is Yes, Acting on What Matters, and that was written by Peter Block in 2002. And in the very last chapter of that book, Mr. Block talks about the archetypes of leadership, and he talks about some leaders that resemble engineers and some people that resemble artists, and he comes to the conclusion that the most effective leaders are the ones that can nicely wear the label of architect because they mesh art and science nicely together. But that's a very good book. It would be worth your time. Also, from reading some of your comments, both in your learning task and the discussion forums, several of you have commented about the interconnectedness of the work and the people that makes for more effective schools. And one of the most interesting books I've read in the last 3 years is actually a book not about education and not about organization life, but the title of the book is The Hidden Life of Trees, What They Feel and How They Communicate. It was written by a German forester named Wohleben, Peter Wohleben, and it was written in 2016. But in that book, Dr. Wohleben uses research. He's not just making this stuff up, but he uses research to describe the powerful interconnections below the soil that we never see in trees, and that they transfer nutrients to one another. There are such things as mother trees, which I did not know, who take it upon themselves to make sure that the saplings have enough nutrition to help get started, because the mother tree knows that their life is limited and someone has to fill that gap when they're gone. There's such a thing as called a mycorrhizal network. And now I want you to make this leap with me. The same thing exists in an organization. What you see above the ground what you see above the ground is the reflection of the health of what's below the ground. The interconnectedness, the healthy soil, the ability of the different sizes, ages, and types of organizational members to contribute in a meaningful way to that underlying whole. Good work. And then finally, I mentioned Seth Godin to you a while ago. He recommended a book last year that by actually, the guy is not a playwright, a scriptwriter out in Hollywood named Stephen Pressfield. And the book was written in 2016, but the title of the book is Nobody Wants to Read Your Shit, Why That Is and What You Can Do About It. And it was really quite a good book. But as I was reading your stuff and thinking about how you and I can become more effective communicators, particularly with writing, that book came to mind, and I can tell you now that it's worthy of your time. I'm going to jump now into the Q&A section of our class, but I'm going to start with a question that Caitlin in Saudi Arabia sent to me this afternoon via email. It's 2:30 in the morning in Saudi Arabia, and Caitlin says she wasn't going to stay up and listen to this. I don't know why. I thought, I can't believe people won't tune in and listen to me. But anyway, she said that she had noticed in a number of the studies that she'd looked at that there wasn't a driving research question, but rather like a narrative paragraph that described the purpose of the study. It seemed like there was not a driving question. And she said that she was under the assumption that all of that research is driven by a question or questions, and wanted to know if I could explain why. And I'll take a stab at that. In week 5, you all learned week 4, you all learned mostly about most of the focus was on qualitative research. And one of the content providers that we studied that week talked about the way that quantitative research generally is driven around first claiming a hypothesis and or a null hypothesis, and then designing a question to either prove or disprove those. Qualitative research, on the other hand, is designed to see if through observance and questioning you can come about finding a theory. So one of the quantitative started with a theory and developed a question to see if they could prove or disprove the theory. And the qualitative was operated from the other direction, which is we don't really have a theory. Let's see what we can find here from doing this study, if we can tease a theory out of that. So now let's jump to Caitlin's question about whether there's a driving question or not. From time to time, you will come across studies that don't declare in the big bold banner at the top what their driving question is. They will identify a problem or a theme that they want to study. And usually they'll say, the purpose of the study is for us to see if we can garner and gain enough information in this area that will help inform our practice, Almost always, when you run across studies that do not have a driving research question or questions, it'll be a qualitative study. It'll be one focused on, we don't really have a theory yet. We have a thought that we want to chase, and we'll see if there's a theory that underlies it. And those are the kinds of studies I would be shocked if you ever came across a quantitative study that did not have a very clearly stated research question or questions. So Caitlin, there's the answer from me. And to your question, the floor is now open for any of the rest of you if you got questions. I know what your April is like. Holy moly, my daughters and their husbands are chasing their tail right now. I'm so proud that you are willing to do it. If you got a question, you can ask me verbally, or it would be better if you put it in the chat box. That way I can read it. As you know, I don't hear all that well. And my lovely bride will tell you I don't hear very well at all, selectively. Margie asked if I'd speak to the final exam. Yes, I sent that to you earlier, and the final exam will be in 3 parts. The first part will be I'll ask you the top 10 things you learned, and we've already practiced on that week 3, I think. But I'm going to ask you the top 10 things you learned. And as you all will see, and you'll get to see everybody else's work on that too. I'll turn that back to you as well. Part 2, I'll ask you to, I can't remember, part 2 and 3. One of them is I'll ask you for your assessment of the learning task or the activities that we've engaged in relation to the ELCC standards. I'll say, in relation to ELCC standard 3, organizational management. What was the learning task or the activity or the conversation that you had this term that you think was most highly aligned to that standard? And then in the other part, the final part is the proposal, and your research proposal. And obviously, I'm not asking you to conduct the study, but I want you to be able to articulate. And I ask you specifically for the things of that study. I want to know what research question is going to drive the study. I want to know something about the sample set. I want to know what you think the limitations are. All those critical components to a study, you're going to have to articulate, and that's why we've been practicing it all along. I suspect most of you are probably at least halfway done with your final exam already. Catherine asked about week 7. You stole my thunder, ma'am. I intend to open the week 7 module. I have a speaking engagement tomorrow, but I was up at 3:45 this morning. If I wake up that early again tomorrow morning, you'll have it tomorrow. But at the very latest, you'll have it on Friday. My intention is to open the week 7 module for you either tomorrow or Friday, so that you'll have an extra day or 2 to work on that. Other questions? Thanks for those questions, by the way. Michelle, are you Astra? Is that okay? Do you prefer Michelle or Astra? Or do you care? Okay, all right, thank you. So Michelle, I'm assuming, Michelle, that you're asking about the responses in the form of list on the final exam. Is that correct? Okay, yeah. List. I'm not asking you for long paragraphs. I want you to be clear. I don't want you to say the top. For instance, in your top 10 learning, I don't want you to say learning task 3.1. I want you to tell me what you learned. I want to know what you learned. Sherelle, some of the research does not list the theoretical framework. Correct, Sherelle. And if the authors of the study used a theoretical framework, they will declare it wide open and in front of everybody in the first paragraphs of the study. So sometimes there's just not a theoretical framework that's driving it, and that's okay. Denise, unless you have otherwise noted, can we assume that the research question we've been working on so far fine? Yes. And as I mentioned last week too, I'm very cautious about, if you want me to critique your question specifically, then email me and say, tell me what you think about the question, and I will respond. But I'm very cautious and wary of jumping in there and publicly critiquing your questions. One, I want you to dig and scratch, and I want you to look at other people's questions, because you'll learn as much from each other as you could ever learn from me. But the thing I don't want to do is pour water on your work, and I don't want my critiques that might have come out in the open to serve to cause you to pull back and be reluctant to take risks. There's a leadership lesson in that as well. Thanks for asking questions. By golly. Mo's sitting on the front porch with my glass of scotch just waiting on me for class to end. It's a beautiful day here in West Texas, by the way. Other questions? Go Mo. I agree. I still don't know, but just for a very small window of time in her life, she's one of the most intelligent people that I know with great judgment, but she just slipped there very momentarily and made a poor decision. Okay, let me sign off then. I know some of you are in your very last term, and I'm proud of you. I know I have not forgotten what a challenge it is to get through graduate school. And I know some of you will continue and go for your doctorate, and that'll be like a whole nother version of hell for you, but it's a worthy journey. But for those of you that are graduating, congratulations to you. I had intention of being on graduation, but my mom informed me today that my dad's having some surgery the day before graduation, so I don't know if I'm going to get there or not. If I do make it, I think you'll recognize me, and I want you to come introduce yourself to me if you see me there. But I want to say this too, as you're approaching that graduation thing, because I know finishing graduate school is a monster, and most of you got to this point with the help and support of some loving others. And it might be a spouse, it might be parents, or just maybe a good friend. I don't know, but very few people get to where you are all by themselves. Please take time to thank those people that helped you get there, because they made some serious sacrifices along the way, just as you did. And finally, I can't convey to you all effectively enough how grateful I am that you've allowed me to be part of your learning journey. I hope that I've helped it and not gotten in the way too much. And for those of you, some of you have already told me that you're going to be in class with me again next term. Good for me. I hope it's good for you. I'm going to sign off now. You all know how to get hold of me, and I think you all know that I'll get back to you in a hurry. And thanks for the kind words over on the chat box. Good night, all.